It is my honor to introduce the Technology in the Face of Worker and Civil Rights panel. I know you were waiting for this one today because you know that already big corporations and government organizations are utilizing AI technology as the dominant part of their workflow. And the flaws, the biases, the inaccuracies in this technology are perpetuating stereotypes while also creating barriers between certain individuals and access to the public and the financial resources and employment opportunities. The implications of AI technology are being felt right now, and in the decades to come, this technology is going to affect all aspects of human life. So what a better moderator for this discussion than the AFL-CIO Chief of Staff, Julie Colloer. Julie began her career in the labor movement at the AFL-CIO more than 20 years ago, and she is a longtime political strategist who brings deep knowledge and understanding, not just of the labor movement, but government relations and political campaigns. The union movement is expanding its outreach in new communities, industries, and regions, and centering unrepresented groups in the building of a fairer economy. It is a great honor and privilege to welcome Julie, and I'm going to hand the mic on over to you.
Testing. Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. I am so excited to moderate this panel this afternoon with what I would consider three history makers in our movement. And I'm going to ask Maya and Fred, please join me on the stage because I want to give due diligence in giving their bios so you know just how qualified they are to talk on all of these issues. And I want to say hello to Lorena, who is joining us via Zoom. You all should see her flanking the screens on either side of the page. Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher is a former state legislator, attorney, community organizer, and activist. And she is the first woman and first person of color to serve as chief officer of the California Labor Federation of the AFL-CIO. Please, yes, let's clap for that. She served in the California State Assembly from 2013 to 2022. During her tenure, she successfully sponsored and passed multiple pieces of legislation in California aimed at increasing healthcare access and putting more protections in place for workers. She passed historic legislation allowing every single Californian the ability to earn paid sick leave. She authored legislation making California the first state in the nation to require farm workers to be paid overtime when they work an 8-hour day. She helped raise the minimum wage in California, which increased by $1 each year until the full implementation of $15 in 2022. And she's introduced and passed important legislation around employee misclassification and wage theft. As it relates to this conversation, Lorena has really been out front when it comes to the state level on the impact of AI on workers, and she's played an instrumental role in the fight around autonomous vehicles, which I'm sure we'll hear about in just a few minutes. To my right, Maya Wiley is a nationally respected civil rights attorney, activist, leader, academic, legal analyst, and commentator for NBC and MSNBC News. On social, civil, and economic justice, she has dedicated her life to fights for equality and fairness. She's the real deal. Her accolades and expertise precede her from the very real impact she's had on racial justice issues, race and poverty as it relates to education, the digital divide, land use planning, and the green economy, just to name a few. She is currently the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which is the nation's oldest and largest civil rights coalition, with a diverse membership of more than 240 national organizations working to build an America as good as its ideals. It's a coalition that's dedicated to democracy, and LCCR's work is nonpartisan, from the right to vote, and the recently announced established the first of its kind Center for Civil Rights and Technology, which I'm sure we'll hear more about. This center is going to expand and deepen our longstanding work on media and technology, and it will actively work with our coalition advocates, academics, policymakers, and the policymakers in the private sector when it comes to positive possibilities around artificial intelligence. And our last panelist participant, Fred Redmond, our Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO, who just 2 years ago, it's hard to imagine that was just 2 years ago, made history, along with Liz Shuler, as being elected the highest-ranking African-American officer in the history of the labor movement. Yes. There is nowhere Fred goes where he doesn't lead. He is the conscience of our labor movement. He is a master bargainer, strategizer, and civil rights activist. He connects the dots for our labor movement when it comes to our very close and at times complicated, but always strong relationship with the civil rights movement. Fred has a long history in our movement, which started in 1973 when he went to work at Reynolds Metals Company in Chicago, which is where he first joined the United Steelworkers. He quickly rose through the ranks to being a national vice president before being elected to the Secretary-Treasurer's office at the AFL-CIO. He has spent his entire life fighting for racial justice in the workplace and throughout our communities. And he currently chairs the AFL-CIO's Task Force on Racial Justice, which is a body focused on taking concrete action to address America's long history on racism and police violence against all people of color. He has served as chair of the board of directors of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, the Trans-Africa Forum, and in 2021 was elected president of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas, a prestigious international post. But to know Fred is to know that his most coveted titles are that of husband, father, grandfather, and friend. So with that, let's get right into it. This morning, many of us spent the morning at the convention center going through the Consumer Electronics Show. This is my first time being here. This is an experience, quite frankly, I'm still processing. I was awe-inspired. It was exciting, but I also left with a lot of anxiety and fear. And Fred, you and I talked briefly after we did the tour, and it seemed that every exhibit that we went by, the top talking point was about capacity, how it used to take 10 workers to do this function that AI is now, only going to require 1 worker to do. And I think the scariest part for me was going through the healthcare section and going to the healthy selfie booth, where you take a selfie, and based on facial recognition software, probably other technologies, it'll give you a diagnosis just based on your picture. And then I think about other AI technologies that companies like Google and Amazon are using in their hiring, where during virtual interviews, AI is assessing intonation, how you speak, how you smile, to determine your employability. And Fred, when I put all of this together, and again, like I said, I'm still processing it, I think it's important that we start to really think about in a real way, what role do our unions play? Not only in this technology, and those are just a couple examples in our workplace, but also just within the civil rights space.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. And first of all, I want to say how privileged I am to be sharing this stage with 2 dynamite sisters, and Lorena and Maya, and I look forward to this discussion. Let me just say this. We've had a lot of discussion this morning about the importance of collective bargaining over issues of AI and how it's going to affect workers throughout this country. And I'm reminded, Maya, back in 1964, with the passage of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, organized labor began a process of negotiating civil rights language into our collective bargaining agreements, because we wanted to make sure that the employers that we worked for, first of all, abided by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which was to prevent racial discrimination in hiring practices on the job. And I think that what we need to do in the labor movement as we approach AI in the workplace is during those same discussions that we have over protecting our membership, our seniority rights, and other rights that we have on the job when we talk about AI, we also got to revisit our civil rights languages on our collective bargaining agreement and make sure that AI, which has the capacity of really setting us back when it comes to hiring practices, when it comes to issues of job promotions, if we are not examining the impact that AI could have on those in the workforce who already have protections under Title VII. I'm talking about women, I'm talking about people of color, I'm talking about handicapped, and we have to be as aggressive on the issue of our civil rights language as we are in terms of protecting our collective bargaining rights as we approach this subject. Look, we have a dual responsibility, though. We have a responsibility in the workplace, and we also have a responsibility outside of the workplace, because what we have seen over the last couple of years through our great organizing victories is, make no doubt about it, the future of the labor movement happened to be brown, black, Asian, female, and young. And we have a responsibility to protect our members outside of the workplace when it comes to issues of AI. Look, when we look at the information that's going to be incorporated, has the capacity to be incorporated in these algorithms, okay, then we have to make sure that the biases against women, people with disabilities, people of color, that the biases that we have already experiencing in society do not go into the framing of the algorithms. Okay, we have to be very intentional, and the labor movement have to be at the table as we deal with social justice policy as pertains to AI. I don't know, you could call it a blueprint on AI, a Bill of Rights, but we have to understand that we already are living in a society with many racial disparities. We have racial disparities in healthcare, in housing, and in incarceration rates and public education. And we cannot sit idly by without being at the table in the discussions with our community partners and allies like the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, the NAACP, and other social justice groups who we have historical relationships with, okay, to make sure that AI is not impacting underserved communities throughout this country in a negative fashion. So I think that's the responsibility that organized labor have, not just in the workplace, but also working and utilizing our constituency groups also to work within our communities to make sure that the impact is not negative.
Thank you for that, Fred. And Lorena, please clap for that. That was great. I want to bring you into this conversation, Lorena, because you've said, quote, the only way workers have a meaningful voice about artificial intelligence in the workplace is if they have a union and can collectively bargain on how this technology is utilized. And in particular, this technology is here. We're seeing it already being utilized at the government level, particularly in state governments. And let's be honest, it was pretty much born in your state of California. So I wanted to bring you into the conversation to give us your take on it.
Yeah, I think that's right. We have already seen the effects, and we've also seen in California unions start to bargain around it. Of course, SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild being some of the first unions to take this on at the table and in a meaningful way. But even prior to that, we've seen, at least in our state legislature, an attempt to get at the fact that when we talk about civil rights, we know the ultimate civil rights issue is a jobs issue. You said it yourself. If we can replace 10 workers with one worker because of AI, that is an overarching civil rights issue. What type of workers do you think are being replaced? And we need to have that discussion. Here at the California Labor Federation, AFL-CIO, we say we're technology neutral. We're not suggesting that a technology is good or bad. However, when worker voices are centered and we can collectively bargain around the use of technology and AI in the workplace, then we ensure that technology can actually be good. AI should make us safer. Let's talk in particular about driverless trucks. That's something that's hit California, something we've been trying to legislate on, and something that is interesting when we talk about how technology has changed worker rights basically in California. So we had imposed on us in California by Uber and Lyft and gig companies a two-tier status where drivers, delivery drivers and rideshare drivers don't have the same rights as other workers. Now, coincidentally, or maybe not, a vast majority of those drivers are Black and brown and immigrant. So you suddenly have this two-tiered system where those workers don't have the same rights to minimum wage and overtime. They don't have the same rights to Social Security and to some of our protections that we fought for employee status. They don't have the right to organize. And then on top of that, you now have the introduction of driverless vehicles. Whose jobs are being replaced? Those same drivers that we've already taken many of the rights away from. So we said, well, let's take on driverless big rigs, right? Nobody thinks it's a good idea to allow a 2-ton vehicle on our highways without a human operator. We have a very simple proposal to ensure that a truck driver or a bus driver stays in the vehicle with the technology. Our hope is that the technology, along with a human operator, can create the best situation for safety and for jobs possible. But what companies are trying to do is totally eliminate workers. And that is an ultimate civil rights issue.
Absolutely. We are in 2024. I don't have to tell everyone in this room what happens in November of this year, a major election. And we've touched on Senator Schumer's insight forums that he's been having. And Maya, I know you recently testified, this past September on the Hill about AI and the future of our elections and the threats of disinformation on our democracy. And during your testimony, you gave a lot of examples of what those threats are, but you also gave some proposed solutions or things we need to start working on. I was hoping you could talk a little bit just about our election system and the threat of disinformation and the role that AI plays in it, because it's not just about the jobs. It's about, our future, quite frankly. And there is a lot riding on our future, whether you're a worker, whether you have a union or not, this year politically.
Well, first of all, let me just say it is my great pleasure to be here, not just because I'm with wonderful labor leaders, but because the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, founded in 1950, was founded by A. Philip Randolph, along with the NAACP and Jewish allies. But I say that because labor rights are civil rights, and we can't forget that. So everything we've been talking about is civil rights, whether we say civil rights or not. And then that does bring us back to democracy, because there's so many things I could say about this. But let me just talk about our elections. When we have AI, what it does, and I absolutely agree with Lorena about it, it's technology neutral, meaning technology is a tool. It can do harm, it can do good. Depends on how it's designed, who's designing it, and how they're using it, and what they want to do with it. So what do you have in an unregulated system? Your labor. What happens when there's no regulation around labor? People get abused. So when we talk about democracy, when we talk about elections, and then we say AI in elections, let's back up. Let's go back to, I don't know, January 6th comes to mind. Rooted in election denial, rooted in intentional disinformation, sometimes driven by foreign governments, but as we know, according to our own government, even the FBI under a Trump administration appointee said it is actually white supremacists who pose the greatest threat to our democracy. That's homegrown. But part of that was the lies about who was violating election laws and whether or not we had a legitimate election or not. That, by the way, was highly racially coded. Remember, not just because of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, whose names now need to be indelibly written in the history of civil rights activists. As public servants, as workers who were simply trying to make sure everybody could vote. But what was translated, and for those of y'all from our chief of staff is from Atlanta, Georgia, you might remember that there was a video, drop boxes, right? Folks with ballots at drop boxes went viral, and in Arizona, a politician called for folks, because of this viral video that suggested a law violation. By the way, that was just lawful conduct, but it got lied about, called unlawful. The next thing we know, there are people with rifles called out vigilantes by an elected official and told to guard the ballot boxes. These were, I'm going to say it, these were white people with guns making people afraid to go drop off their ballots because of a lie. Now, that video was a real video. The lie was about what was happening in the video. But what artificial intelligence does is it puts in every single person's hand the ability to create what we call a deep fake, which is you can make it look like a crime is being committed. You can make it look like anybody, any one of us is committing it. And then you can put it out in public. Now, one of the things that means is we are bracing for and expecting artificial intelligence to vastly expand a problem we have already been seeing expanding in the United States, which is hate and bias, social media companies' policies, what gets posted. By the way, this is not a free speech issue. Anybody tells you we're anti-free speech, that too is disinformation. No. If it's a private company with user engagement rules to create a community, you're allowed to say, y'all can't do that hate up in here. Y'all can't, no, you can't come in here and talk about the N-word. No, you can't come in here and spread lies about what's happening and who shouldn't be able to vote and who's stealing votes if it's untrue. No, you shouldn't be able to lie about vaccines and whether, right, all of those. Well, guess what the social media companies are doing right now? They are saying election denial claims from the 2020 election are now okay to post. 49 lawsuits lost because there was no evidence, it was stolen. But all of this, I'm just saying this because now we're seeing political campaigns and parties using artificial intelligence to make it sound like someone is saying something they're not saying or didn't say. But we're also seeing that what the social media company is saying is, okay, just label it. That labeling is only if the person who, or company or party or politician who's posting it says, I'm gonna say I used artificial intelligence to create this. Yeah, I thought it was funny too. Until I realized, oh wait, this is my democracy. And they're serious. Now, I'm only saying this because the primary problem here is that we are not using the R word, which is regulation, regulation, regulation. Why would we ever say it is okay and permissible for any politician or party to use any kind of deep fake in an election to ask for our votes? I mean, that's a real question. Why can't they just use actual footage? By the way, the other thing we have to know about this is, and it's really important because the labor movement has such an important role to play, is educating our folks on this. Because, you know, one of the things that art you can do is, it's not just visual, it's not just video, it's audio. So think about this. I'm on MSNBC. My voice, anybody can go on YouTube and get clips of my voice. And then they can use that audio with the technology, artificial intelligence we have available today to use my voice, make it sound like it's me, make it sound like I'm saying things I never said, and then use it to contact anybody they believe I could motivate by making it sound like I'm saying things I never said, like text your vote to, yeah. I'm like, he's coming home with me, so, because you got work to do. No, you're right there. Seriously, though, think about that. So if we're not educating folks, someone on your family calls you and tells you to do something about voting, call your family member back and make sure it was them. But that's how insidious this is, and we know that there is a tremendous number of people out in this country who have no qualms about stealing an election. None.
Whew. So Maya, there's when it's deliberate and insidious and we're in control of it. And then there's when AI just gets it wrong. And there are some pretty prominent examples with high consequences of when AI has just gotten it wrong. In Michigan, the unemployment office wrongly flagged 40,000 people as having taken advantage of their unemployment benefits. And so they went after those 40,000 people with fines, which led to bankruptcies and other financial consequences. In the state of Michigan, Portia Woodruff, which is a story I know you all know very well. African-American, 8-month pregnant woman was accused of robbery and carjacking and was identified by facial recognition technology. Imprisoned, put in jail, went into contractions in jail, got out on a $100,000 bond, only to find out that the facial recognition software got it wrong. Because facial recognition software is a little challenged with identifying people of color. And so when you think about things like using facial recognition software to analyze interviews, right? And people have accents. People have disabilities, Fred, as you mentioned. Lorena, when you were talking about autonomous drivers, and the thought of a 2-ton truck being unmanned and the danger that that can pose. There are so many scary things. What do we do? So I would like each of you to give us, an example of something we can do. Maya, you kind of started it with the education piece. Lorena, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I hate to bring it back to just organizing in your workplace, but it's such an essential portion of taking this on. What we're dealing with in California is the introduction of AI in the healthcare industry. And when you think about scary things that can go wrong, we have a situation where a computer can decide what is wrong with a patient, and the nurse has a hard time overruling that despite what she has seen or he has seen right in front of their own eyes. We already know that people of color, and in particular Black women, face some challenges when it comes to the healthcare industry. We don't even have the right to know who is deciding how to code these AI machines, if you will, who's making those decisions? We require nurses and nurse practitioners and doctors to take a test to ensure that they know what is happening. We don't even know what the standard is on computers making a decision. However, if we can organize in workplaces, demand that technology is a mandatory subject of bargaining, then we're at least in a better spot to be able to protect in healthcare, it's patients, in schools, it's students, whatever it is, to be able to have that worker-centered voice where we can override what are going to be natural prejudices and biases that enter into the AI stream. That's a beginning, a way we can start to tackle this. But I gotta say, after hearing Maya's warning, I wasn't planning to talk about elections. I wasn't planning to discuss AI in elections with our members here, but clearly this has to be an essential part as well, because just faking people out is a really scary thought.
Did Fred?
Well, a couple of things that I think we, as a labor movement, should focus on. First of all, as far as AI in the workplace is concerned, we as a labor movement have to continue our fight for labor law reform, and we need to ensure that going into the future, issues of artificial intelligence are mandatory subjects of bargaining. And we have to insist upon that, and we have to make that our fight as we talk about passing the PRO Act and other labor law reform issues, number one. And then, the second part about it is we have to understand who are the victims of AI or the potential victims. When we look in the workplaces, then we see the people who are more advanced in this stuff, artificial intelligence, are the companies that has workers that are more vulnerable, such as the hospitality industry. People go to work every day. The only thing they want to do is share in the wealth that they help to create. But these are industries like hospitality, healthcare, people who care for our sick and, wipe the sweat off of the brow of folks who was dying during COVID. But these are the industries that's really, really divulging and investing a lot of resources to move this issue of artificial intelligence, and these are the workers who are most vulnerable. So we have to realize the vulnerability of the workers that could really be affected by AI if it's not handled properly. And then when we look into our communities, as we said, it's, the algorithms is information in. Information you put in is the information you get out on the other end. And as long as we accept as a society a criminal profile, okay, that reflects black and brown men in this country, okay, then that's the result that's going to come out on that end when we start using algorithms and AI in terms of developing criminal profiles. And then we look at who has been harmed more in society when it comes to the issue of fair housing in this country. And we have to look at these profiles that these algorithms have the potential to project that will only exacerbate the situation. So, as a labor movement, we just can't afford to sit on the sidelines. We have to look at this as a threat, not only to our workplace, but also to our society and to our members in their communities and in, the overall community of people, okay, who are more prone to be workers and more prone to identify with our issues and the things that we believe in the labor movement. So we have to take a holistic approach. We have to be at all tables as a labor movement because there are so many workers that's vulnerable inside the workplace and outside of the workplace.
Whew, okay, building on these really important points. What does the labor movement do best? Organize, organize, organize. And what do we have to organize about right now? Everything. But let me just say that. I know, okay, you're like, okay, I'm tired already, Maya. Look, We're in a paradigm shift moment in this country and on this globe. There are three major components to this paradigm shift: climate change, demographic change, by which we mean, Fred said it earlier, who's becoming, not just becoming, I mean, there's already been a majority of the world was already folks not white. But this country has been changing, which is exactly why we are seeing the attack on our rights, the attack on labor and organizing, the attack on voting, the attack on just doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, things that we started to be able to take not for granted, but at least that we had the same moral compass as a country in terms of what our American ideals were and what was not appropriate or okay to do. That's gone, y'all. And now we've got technology change. That's the third. It's changing every single thing. And I'm going to share one example with you from a 2018 survey of experts on the development of AI. And this survey, which was in the Journal of Artificial Intelligence Research, found that AI experts believed that there was at least a 50% chance that within 45 years, machine intelligence systems would outperform humans on everything. Everything. You know what that means? No jobs. No jobs. And what we've actually seen is now look, even the World Economic Forum has said we're going to lose 85 million jobs. 85 million jobs in a matter of a few years. And some new jobs will be created, but not enough. And black folks, 10% more likely to be losing jobs right now due to what's called, I call it double trouble. They call it double disruption. I don't know what we're disrupting. Disrupting a paycheck is not just disruption, but it's robotics and AI coming together. But the only reason I say that is because it's a choice. It's a choice to just say it's inevitable. There's nothing inevitable about what artificial intelligence should be allowed to do or not do. That's a policy choice. So we have the ability to organize right now to say, and actually there are actually experts and data scientists that agree with this. That says, no, we should actually make policy decisions to say, you can't use AI for every damn thing. You just can't. Like you can't use it as a political party or politician to lie about what somebody said. You just can't. You just can't. Well, guess what? And you can't just take away every single goddamn job in the planet. You just can't. Everything can't become a not job. But the other thing, and this is going back to Lorena's point, am I right? I don't know what the rest, I mean. So, but the other thing is, going back to Lorena's point about healthcare, because one of the examples the industry uses all the time, because it is neutral unless you're just in a race for money. And then it ain't neutral. It's about where you can make the most money, no matter who is harmed. No matter what job is taken away. So here's the thing. 200 million people. Their data was in a system, their healthcare data, because that created an algorithm that was going to tell people who was most likely to need hospital services. And guess what it showed? You know who needed hospitals? Guess who needed hospital services more than anybody else? White people with money. You know why? There are 200 million people, the folks who could get hospital services. Okay? So if you don't have health care, if you're in a job and you don't have health care insurance, you're not getting hospital services. And you're probably, if you're on Medicaid, you might be getting patient dumped, which is one of the civil rights way back in my day. I was doing access to health care and dealing with patient dumping, which was usually black and brown people getting dumped. I'm only saying this because who says you can use something that's never been tested and proven to be safe before it's utilized? As a friend of mine, Damon Hewitt, said, who runs the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, doing incredibly important work in this area, he said, toasters get more scrutiny than artificial intelligence do right now before they're on the market. And it's true. So all I'm saying is, and I know I'll shut up now, but Amanda say I'm never asking her to speak again. But I'm telling you, we have to, as a community, start to say, no, you don't. Regulation, everybody agrees with regulation. Nobody's defining it. I define it as you can't take all our jobs, you can't tell us you can use something that ain't safe, and you can't take our democracy because you choose to make money any old way you want.
So I think we're technically at time, but I'm going to take moderator's privilege of taking another 2 minutes because we talked about some heavy things, and some of it was a little scary. So I want to try and end on a little more of a positive note and just ask each of you, what makes you hopeful about AI in this space?
I'll go ahead and start, if that's okay.
Please.
I will say in this past year, I've been so hopeful by young people. I can't even stand it. When we look at new organizing, when we look at fighting back, when we look at people standing up, it has been young people and primarily young people of color in this country who have said enough is enough. They're not going to take what has been spoon-fed to them. They're going to organize. They're going to demand more. And that makes me hopeful.
Thank you. Awesome.
What makes me hopeful is I look at this as an issue that has historically, there's been certain issues in our history that has galvanized the civil rights movement and the labor movement. And I look at this issue as one of those moments in history where both of these movements come together. The two movements, who Dr. King said is the most effective movement on the planet when it comes to social and economic justice. And I think this is an issue that galvanizes these two movements to come together, to do a critical analysis, to fight together, and understanding that the impact that this issue of artificial intelligence can have on our society as a whole, particularly those of the most vulnerable in our society.
SAG-AFTRA gives me hope. Unite Here gives me hope. Everybody in the AFL gives me hope. But because, look, United Auto Workers gives me hope. Organizing gives me hope. Because everything we've ever done right in this country came from organizing. Everything. And we have people on our side because most Americans are terrified. They just don't know yet that they have a choice. They just don't know yet, but that's what organizing tells them. And I agree, this generation coming up behind us is on fire. It's on fire. And part of the reason folks are rigging things and stealing things and trying to take things and lying about things is because they can't win unless they do. But all that's showing us is we got so much power, they're terrified. They are terrified. So all of you give me hope, the AFL, the fact that now we've got the Institute. And look, we're rolling deep and hard now. And every last technology company has said out loud, we agree there has to be regulation. That is a huge opportunity for organizing because we can back them into the corner about what that regulation means, how it's defined, and who benefits from it.
Awesome. Thank you to this panel. Thank you all so much for your expertise. Lorena, thank you for participating even remotely, and more to come. Thanks, everyone.